And welcome back. In the previous video we were removing items, prerequisite items if you want to call them that, to get those cylinder heads out, and we're continuing with that. We commented on removing the spark plugs again just as a protective measure so that we didn't damage one while removing a particular cylinder head. The factory installed plugs were iridium. When we went with the supercharger, we also went with iridium plugs, just one step colder. I'll explain more when we get into the assembly process what that means. But as you can see here, we have removed them because iridium plugs are expensive. If you damage one, okay. If you damage multiple, the cost can add up pretty quick. So when we uninstalled them, you can see here in the box, we just marked each cylinder, and we've got, so that way when we install them, they were married together with a particular cylinder. We want them to go back into that cylinder. And what you can see here is the 5/8 inch spark plug socket with a little rubber boot on it that we use to do this. Now this is a socket that has a swivel already built into it. I saw another YouTuber doing his spark plugs on his Hemi use this, and this is very useful. I'll have a link in the description for this. This makes getting the far ones back towards the firewall out much easier because it's a nice thin socket. It's able to get down into that spark plug well, and because it has that swivel on the end of it, you can easily get a 3/8 inch extension and then a ratchet on it, because as you get closer to the end of that cylinder, more up towards that firewall, you quickly start to run out of space. And one thing I wanted to show you is that even with this helping you out space wise, you may want to get one of these small, like 2-inch extensions. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to assemble this, show you this on the driver's side cylinder when we were taking these spark plugs out. Just kind of, hopefully this gives you a heads up and lets you know what you're in for. Yes, now I'm shooting this particular section of the video out of sequence, which is why you see the passenger cylinder head missing, but don't worry, you'll see that up and coming here in a short. Now that's your rearmost cylinder, and as I was stated earlier, climb up in here so I can get to this port. Now I'm going to put this swivel socket in. Obviously we've already taken the plugs out, but just to show you that extension sticks out just enough in there that you can still get a ratchet on that and zip that out. But you can see you're pretty close to the firewall, so that socket does a rather nice job of allowing you to get in there, at least with a small extension, and still get a ratchet on that and get those plugs out of that far end. So just wanted to show you that real quick. I'm going to splice this into the beginning part of the video that will explain and show why you can clearly see here the passenger side cylinder head is missing. And we'll bring you back, and thank you. And welcome back. You can see that we've got our push rods out. We've got them poked into just a cardboard box here, helping us keep track of the cylinder they came out of, what side they came out of, and whether they were intake or exhaust. Once again, we're going with a hardened set of push rods, so we'll be replacing all these, but the event that we have to go back to using these, we want to make sure that they're married to a specific cylinder and to a task, and that they stay that way should we need to reinstall them along with the original lifters. But I did want to show you this here, and it does make a note of this in the manual. First thing is, when you go to remove the rocker arms, they want you to untorque them in a particular sequence, and that sequence is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then bolt 5. You'll also see that this is an intake push rod, in our case off the number 2 cylinder. I'm going to place it right next to the exhaust push rod for the number 2 cylinder, and you can see the exhaust push rod is actually longer on these Hemi motors, and that's noted in the manual. It's also several other videos on YouTube. You'll notice they'll say the same thing, but just keep that mindful that your exhaust push rod is longer than your intake push rod. That's the reason why the manual says, and it just fell through because my hole's got too much oil in it. I'll fix that later. But again, as the manual states, these push rods are not interchangeable. Exhaust has to be exhaust, intake has to be intake. Now, as far as the rocker arms themselves, again, we've just got them sitting on cardboard to help us keep track of which one is which. The first part, this upper part here, is passenger. This is driver. Intake, exhaust, intake, exhaust. And this is the direction in which we pulled them out of the engine. So this was towards the front of the engine when we pulled it out, as well as on the intake ones. You'll notice that there is a letter I inscribed on that rocker arm there, and as well as if we come down to the opposite end, you see the I there. And on the exhaust ones, you'll see there's no inscription. So that's another way to kind of keep track of which one is the intake rocker versus the exhaust rocker. And the passenger side one, I should say the driver's side one, is the exact same. So if we come to our intake rocker, you can see that we've got our letter I there. Now, on this, on the driver one here. On this driver one, you're going to notice something that probably, obviously shouldn't be there. Now, all of these bolts broke free fine, with the exception of this one. And this is the one that was furthest back towards the rear of the engine, up against the firewall. Not sure what happened. The socket was on there fine. I had a good bite. It wasn't being untorqued any differently than the remainder, but as it was being untorqued, you feel that characteristic slip of the socket. And I don't know if you're like me, you get that sick feeling in the pit of your stomach because you know exactly what just happened. So yes, the edges of that bolt ended up rounding off. I took the socket off, repositioned it, tried to get another bite on it, and it just rounded. The traditional socket just wouldn't bite it anymore. And I didn't look at it closely before I started. I don't know if it was damaged beforehand. Maybe it got damaged at the factory. I'm not sure. Maybe the ratchet wasn't on there as straight and as level as I thought it was. But regardless, this kind of stuff happens. I did panic a little bit, not gonna lie. Bit of a pucker moment because I wanted to get these rockers out. Now, looking at the bolt and the clearance, there's enough meat on that bolt that if you needed to, you could easily get a nice pair of vice grips on it, get enough grip on it, and be able to break that loose. But in watching one of the other YouTubers I watched for the last couple of years, Eric the Car Guy, he demoed a set of these GearWrench. I don't know if you want to call them easy outs. They're not really called that. I forget exactly what they call them. But they're basically meant for removing stripped out fasteners. So I grabbed the 10 mil, tapped it on place to get it onto that head so it would get a bite, and as it tightened down, it just bit into the head of that bolt further, and was, as you can obviously see here, able to break that free. So after hearing that crack and hear it break free and come out, breathe a sigh of relief. Obviously it means that this bolt will have to be replaced with a new one, which again, I'm not overly concerned with that. Hopefully I can get this washer and bolt combo separately, and I don't have to buy a whole new rocker assembly. If I do, then so be it, I'll buy the rocker. But just wanted to show you that and let you know that when you do this stuff, this kind of stuff can happen. And when you got a situation like that where a bolt strips out, yeah, you're going to panic a little bit like I did and go, oh, thinking, oh wow, how am I going to get this thing out of here? And then I remember I had bought these sockets a few months ago and decided to give them a try, and thankfully they worked out well. So just kind of have that in mind if you're going to be doing a job like this, that if you don't have something to remove out strip fasteners, you may want to get something. But I'll give you a shot of the heads here. So you can see we are down to, at this point, of just taking the head bolts out and then seeing if we can get these heads out of here at this stage. So we're going to continue on with that. We're going to see about getting these fasteners broke free. Again, there is a sequence to doing that, and you can see that sequence here of how they want you to remove the torque. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there's 15 fasteners. You got 4 across the top, and then you've got the remaining 8 across the cylinder head. So that's what we're going to proceed with next. We're going to do this on the passenger side, and then we'll see about getting that passenger side cylinder head out. When we got all these bolts out and we're ready to pull that cylinder head, we'll bring you back. Thank you much. Bye. Just want to bring you back real quick and show you we're still progressing. Had an issue with getting one of the cylinder head bolts out, but we were able to get it. It's out. I'm working on the final bit of bolts, which are 10mm bolts that go across the top of the cylinder head. You can see one of them right there. They did double up on those and turn some of those into studs to hold the wiring loom. For the MDS solenoids, the 2 studs, the 1 stud in the center and the next stud over closest to the firewall, are those double studs. And what they used them for was some push down clips to hold the MDS wiring solenoid pack in place, wiring harness in place. They did the same thing on the driver's side, so be aware of that. You might be able to hear some of the dripping because we do have all the big head bolts out at this point in time, so it's actually started to drip some coolant. We did move our pan, as you can see, lengthwise underneath the area of the cylinder head. So let me grab what's left of this shop light. This thing's gonna have to be recharged. Oh, and you can see we didn't quite have it over far enough. Got a little bit of a mess, so we'll just pull that over. There we go. That's better. And hopefully that's in a good enough spot to catch it. As again, obviously there is coolant that runs through that cylinder head, and we're taking off another part, so more coolant's going to come off. So that may all kind of dribble out on its own before we have a chance to pull that head completely off, but when we get the rest of those 10mm fasteners out of the top, we'll bring it back. But obviously you may want to have your drip pan underneath there ahead of time, even as you're loosening those bigger head bolts. But I'll bring it back in a bit. And welcome back. Just getting ready to see about tugging to see if I can break the seal on this cylinder head. We've got all the bolts out at this point. We did find one more attachment for a wiring harness, which was right here. It goes on the front of the cylinder head right there, kind of downward at an angle from the circle that you see here. Let me see if I can get in closer. You can see it can go there. And yes, I did break that one as well, so I'll have to source some replacement clips. But it's just a standard Christmas tree clip, and it was clipped into an unused bolt hole there. So make sure you account for that. I think that's finally all the wiring harnesses that were attached to this head. I'm just going to take a pry bar, for example, and kind of get down here, because you can kind of get a little bit on the corner of the head and the cylinder block, engine block, and be able to kind of pry up on that and hopefully crack that seal loose. So I'm going to work on that. And as far as getting the head out of here, depending on how well it works, again, remember we still have the exhaust manifold attached to this. I may try to crack it loose and bring it up and over. Just got to be mindful of not to put any weight on this air conditioning line, or if we can get it to slide underneath this air conditioning line and pull it out that way. Either way, what I'm going to do is what I've done before. When I was cracking the cylinder head bolts loose, I was actually standing on that round bar that you see there. I believe that is part of the anti-sway bar assembly, and with having the radiator and everything out of here, there's plenty of room for me to stand there. So I think I'm going to stand there and then kind of work on and maneuver this cylinder head a bit. Again, we got to be mindful of the MDS wiring that you can see me playing with there, just to make sure that we don't snag and rip any of that. And like I said, I'm gonna fight with the cylinder head for a little bit. I don't have a really good way of setting you up on a tripod to get you to see this, but I'll definitely bring you back once we get this cylinder head out of here. And I'll talk to you later. Bye. And welcome back. As you can see, we have our prize. We have our passenger side cylinder head removed at this point. We did remove one more Christmas tree clip that went right here on the side of the block with the connector, what looks to be the oil pressure sensor, if I believe correctly, just to free up some more slack on the wiring harness, which we zip tied to the air conditioning line again, just to kind of pull it way out of the way and give us some extra room. It did come off the guide dowel pins pretty easily, and what I found easiest to do was to get it off the cylinder block, which again, leaving the exhaust manifold attached makes that cylinder head heavy. Just word of warning, it's a cast iron head obviously, but it has quite a bit of weight. Was to get the cylinder head off, get it to lay flat in this space here, and then kind of pick it up from end to end, maneuver it this way to come out from underneath all of this. Got it halfway up, switched hands, grabbed it from here, finally set it down on top of the top radiator support, or top of the frame support here. Had my wife come in and just kind of hold the cylinder head, steady it so it wouldn't fall, so I could get out of the truck and then kind of pick it up and move it to where it rests now, which is on the bench. Upon getting the cylinder head out, what I'm going to do going forward is that we're going to put the cylinder head back in without the exhaust manifold attached. Although, yeah, per the book, it can be done. We did it. It just made it a pain to deal with. So we're going to put the cylinder head on. Then we'll put the exhaust manifold onto it. It'll make it a bit of a pain, but because we'll have to come through the passenger side fender to tighten the bolts up for the exhaust manifold, but I'd rather do that than try to fight with it and risk damaging a new head gasket seal or something along that nature. We did go through and use shop towels and wipe out any of the coolant that fell into the cylinders, just so it doesn't cause a problem, because it will be a bit yet before we get to reassembly, and I didn't want water in the cylinder causing any potential rust. What we're going to do on the driver's side is we're going to see about dropping that exhaust manifold first. So when we get ready to remove this cylinder head, the plan is we'll break it free, pull it over to the center. I may even put a board here just to rest on this peak and the back of the block there, just to give it some extra layer of protection. See if we can get the cylinder head up, shift it over into the center, and then remove it from the vehicle from there. And we'll have to have I'll have to have some assistance on the outside of the vehicle when we get ready to do that, just to kind of help hold that cylinder head and steady it so I can climb in and out. But that'll be the game plan for that. Let's see what else we have here. One item I wanted to show you, and because I'm not going to edit this out, I'm going to show you that I'm human and I do make mistakes. If you look at that bolt right there, you're going to see that it is stripped halfway down, all the shoulders on this. What had happened here was I was using a 1/2 inch breaker bar and a 15mm socket to break these bigger head bolts loose. And on the cylinder head here, so this is the back of the cylinder head, obviously, where the exhaust manifold attaches to the front. This bolt sits in the lower rear corner. And if you're looking at this, you'll see that you've got some tight walls in here. So what had happened was I was using a different socket. I actually changed out to this one to get the bolt out. The socket I was using, my breaker bar looked and felt like it was straight, but it wasn't. So it was kind of half on there and the half hitting one of these side walls. So when I went to loosen it, all of a sudden it just kind of gave and slipped, and you got that telltale feel that you just stripped out the bolt. first I'm thinking, oh boy, how do I deal with this now? Because my GearWrench set that I showed you earlier didn't have a 15 millimeter. So I was thinking about ordering a 15 millimeter easy out socket to get that, or attempt to get that out. I thought about it and said, well, let me just change out to a different socket. Got an impact socket instead. Was able to get that on there straighter and get enough of a bite on what was left of the shoulders of that bolt. Turned it, and then thankfully we heard that lovely crack of sound that you get when you're letting the torque out. You get that nice kind of not quite high-pitched squeal, but a little bit of a squeal to it. And thankfully, as you can see, we were able to crack that bolt loose and get it out. So we got extremely lucky on this one. So the game plan is we're going to get the exhaust manifold off of this. We'll have to get this cleaned up. One of the modifications will be using those pack springs that you saw earlier as part of the modification. We'll get the valves out. We'll get everything lapped. We'll get the head cleaned up. And then again, that'll be part of the reason why we're doing all this teardown, is to utilize those better parts. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and post this video because I got an inquiry from a friend of mine that's looking to see one of these cylinder heads finally removed. This video is getting to be a bit long enough. We'll go ahead and get this one posted, and then when we do the driver's side one, we'll go ahead and post another video kind of showing basically the same process, except it'll be a little different for how we get the cylinder head out, just because it's on the driver's side and there's so much more to deal with. So that'll be the game plan. We'll drop the exhaust manifold off the driver's side cylinder head, and then we'll work on getting that cylinder head out. Once they're both out, we'll start getting these bad boys cleaned up, tore down, and rebuilt. And I think that is it for now. So if I can say one thing, I'll say it again. When you're taking these cylinder head bolts out, just make extremely sure that if you're using a breaker bar like I was, that you are 100% dead on and you've got a full bite onto those bolts. Again, we got out lucky. We were able to get enough perch on what was left of that bolt to break it free and get it out. Had that not been the case, it would have made for a pretty bad day. But I'm going to call it at this point. I'm going to let shop lights charge up. I'm going to get this video posted, probably take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come back out here and we'll tackle doing the driver's side cylinder head, and we'll bring you along. But I'll catch you later. Bye.